Hello, welcome to chapter 2 of the beginning of all wisdom. And I'm just gonna start right off, I suppose. As Harry watched the sun rise and lighten on the ceiling above him, he vowed he was going to kill Sirius Black. It was all his fault Harry was stuck in the Great Hall, surrounded by every single student in Hogwarts while unable to sleep. Obviously, there were side effects that came with using the amulets. That Harry now understood. So he promised himself he would bring back the amount of amulets he used from two or three each night to one per night. That might help settle his brain back down, so he'd be able to sleep while stuck at the Dursleys. He could also make sure he had enough amulets ahead of time to see him through the summer holidays. They lasted about 2.5 months, so that means 75 amulets. That was a lot, but Harry still had most of the school year to get it done. By the time the other students started waking, Harry was a wreck. His head was pounding and he barely could keep his eyes open. Hermione obviously noticed that Harry wasn't looking good. I didn't sleep well, Harry said before Hermione could say something. I don't like sleeping in new settings, he added, by way of explanation. I had a dreadful dream myself, Hermione said with a small smile of sympathy. Just the thought of Sirius Black being inside the castle really did a number on my sleep. Pardon me. Very sorry. Sorry. No more was said about it as they went back to their dormitories to wash and change their clothes. When bedtime came around, Harry dutifully used only one amulet. It worked well enough that he fell asleep almost immediately, but he woke up a bit more jittery than usual. Still, he vowed to stick to one amulet per night from now on. The whole school was distracted by the whole Sirius Black situation, thus no one noticed that Harry was a bit more short-tempered than usual, had a bit less patience for the world around him while he got used to absorbing only one amulet per night. Eventually he slept peacefully again and woke up refreshed as usual. Oliver Wood went slightly mad with worry about the up-and-coming match against Slytherin. While Harry still loved Quidditch, he wasn't all that invested in it anymore, that it occupied his every waking thought, much to Oliver's obvious disappointment. The day came before the match. Snape took over defense. Day before the match, Snape took over their defense class, telling them Lupin was sick. He dropped so many obvious hints by the end of the class that Harry was convinced Lupin was a werewolf, therefore couldn't teach because it was the full moon had just risen the previous night. Since werewolves were only dangerous when encountered during the full moon, Harry didn't have to worry about it. Lupin was a good teacher, the best they had so far, so Harry kept his mouth shut about his discovery. Harry woke up the day of the match and listened to the wind howl and beat against the windows. So it was going to be a challenging match, wasn't it? Luckily, Draco Malfoy was just as scrawny as Harry, and if Harry found himself blown off course by the storm outside, Malfoy would suffer the same fate. Neither of them would be able to catch the cap. Sorry, I don't know why I'm so stumbly today, although I suppose I usually am. Neither of them would be able to catch the snitch. In the dressing room, Harry cast a variety of charms to make his clothes impervious to rain and wind. Then he did the same to his glasses. Oliver noticed what Harry was doing and insisted he do the same for the whole team, desperate as he was for any advantage he can find. Slytherin was always a formidable enemy on the Quidditch pitch. Malfoy looked pale and drawn as his team walked onto the pitch side by side. All of them were blown sideways by the strong winds and the steep, sweeping rain. Harry could barely make out the students in the stands, it was so thick. so thick was the rain coming down. While his hair was quickly soaked... Sorry, I'm really not with it today. While his hair quickly soaked through his skin, his clothes remained dry. While Harry was of the opinion that Madame Hooch should just cancel the match that day and move it to a day when the students weren't in danger of being blown off their brooms, there was clearly no one cared what Harry thought. The game was on, and the moment Harry got on his broom and rose into the air, he was blown in the opposite direction of where he was trying to go. Malfoy had the same problem. Harry was at least pleased to note. Harry was going to do everything in his power to catch the snitch as fast as he possibly could. The sky got darker and the weather worsened even more. Lightning briefly lit up the sky, followed by a clap of thunder. This was getting absurd, Harry thought, with a chagrined frown. He kept trying to fly around the pitch, though that was getting harder and harder by the second. Malfoy kept trying to follow Harry around, but had trouble keeping up with Harry as well because of the harsh grunts of wind. Harsh gusts of wind. Eventually, Harry spotted a tiny sliver of gold that might be the snitch. Another fork of lightning lit up the sky. Harry used that to pinpoint the snitch. He immediately accelerated in pursuit, Malfoy keeping as close as he could. An odd silence fell over the crowd. While the air grew cold, a woman started screaming and begging for Harry's life. Oh fuck no. The whole stadium was surrounded by Dementors. Harry grabbed his wand and focused all his magic. He had been practicing this spell, trying to think thoughts that made him happy. Now he thought about the fact he would never have to worry about learning magic again. He already knew more magic than the average adult wizard. He was already a wheel wizard. Sorry, he was already a real wizard. Expecto Patronum! A misty fox shot out from Harry's wand, charging at the closest Dementor that's on its way straight to Harry. Behind him, Harry heard a desperate, panicked shout, and when he looked over his shoulder, saw another Dementor rushing at Malfoy, who had gone as pale as a corpse. The snitch zipped away from Harry, but Harry never even considered going after it, even when Malfoy could barely hold on to his broom. Just as Harry reached him, Malfoy lost his grip on the wet wooden handle, and the sharp gust of wind blew him right off his broom. Harry dived after him and quickly caught Malfoy, and through the other boy's sudden weight almost made Harry topple off his broom. Still, Harry managed to lower them both to the grass, his feet squelching as he touched down. Sorry. Sorry. Really, not having a good time with this one. Malfoy slipped off Harry's broom and landed on his butt, looking around as though he wasn't sure where he was. Only now did Harry notice other silver animals shooting through the air, driving off the Dementors. Madame Hooch landed as well. I'm cancelling the match. Both your teams will have a rematch in a few weeks. About time, Harry said with an irritated laugh. Oliver was devastated. Harry let the snitch slip through his fingers to save Malfoy, but Harry ignored him. As much as Harry despised the little Slytherin prick, he wasn't about to watch Malfoy fall to his death just so Harry could win a game. Pomfrey insisted all Quidditch players be examined in the hospital wing, where she fed them steaming mugs of hot chocolate laced with pep-up potion. After an hour, they were free to go. The whole time, Malfoy hadn't said a word, but he was staring at Harry as though he'd never seen him before. A week after the horrible match, Harry found himself walking alone in a corridor on his way back from the library, his bag once again filled with amulets so he could absorb through the amulets. Potter, Malfoy stepped out of an amply cast from right into Harry's path. I'd like a word with you, in here. Malfoy gestured to the classroom, one eyebrow quirked in a bit of a challenge. Harry wasn't sure what to think. Malfoy had mostly left Harry alone through the year, but that didn't mean Harry was suddenly going to trust Malfoy not to punish him. Or I can march up to the headmaster's office right now and tell him about your illegal use of language amulets, Harry said with a satisfied smile. Harry almost dropped his book bag in shock. How the fuck did Malfoy know about that? Without hesitating, Harry all but shoved Malfoy into the classroom, closing the door behind him. He whipped out his wand and cast a few strong-looking and silencing charms. How did you find out? Harry demanded, aiming his wand at Malfoy's chest. Malfoy had his own wand in his hand and pointed it casually at Potter. Harry! Pointed it casually at Harry. You're not nearly as subtle as you think, Potter, Malfoy drawled, almost bored with the whole conversation already. You're a mediocre student. Perhaps in defense you're above average, but you were never able to use advanced magic like that. Like I've seen you use since the summer holidays. Father said you spent 2 weeks alone in Diagon Alley. It's not difficult to add a few things up. Glaring, Harry considered his options. He could curse Malfoy and obliviate him now, but Malfoy had figured it out once before. He'd probably figure it out again, and unless Harry obliviated him to such an extent, he might as well be giving Malfoy brain damage. If that happened, Harry was sure Malfoy's parents would stop at nothing to find out the assailant of their only child. No, it was probably best to come out with some sort of agreement to make sure Malfoy kept his mouth shut. What do you want? Malfoy's eyes narrowed, his gaze suddenly focused. I want in. For a moment, Malfoy stared at the floor, unsure what to say next. Then he inhaled a deep breath and blurted, It's all that Mudblood's fault. She keeps beating me in every class while my parents expect me to get the highest marks. I asked Mother to let me use the amulets, but she refused, said they damage your brain. Malfoy gave Harry once over, roaming his gaze up and down Harry's body. But you look like you're still in one piece, so they can't be that bad. Harry wasn't sure if he should laugh in Malfoy's face about him getting second place to Hermione, or snarl at him for daring to call Hermione such a horrible word. First, don't call Hermione that, he said with a bit of a growl. And second, why should I give you any amulets? Because if I don't, Malfoy said, stepping closer, his grey eyes staring straight into Harry's, I'll tell dear Headmaster Dumbledore what you've been up to. Harry shrugged, his heart hammering in his chest. He really did not want Dumbledore to find out what he'd been doing. All I've done is buy a few language amulets in Diagon Alley. That's not illegal. Malfoy snorted and crossed his arm, one still aimed in Harry's general direction. Do you think Snape would believe you've only been using language amulets when you can suddenly cast a Corporal Patronus? Malfoy threw his head back and laughed as though Snape had already managed to get Harry expelled. It doesn't matter if you deny it. Snape's legitimate. He can read the truth in your mind. Swallowing, Harry briefly looked down, unsure if Malfoy was telling the truth about Snape being able to read minds. He'd never heard of it. Harry's hands started sweating just a bit. He tightened his fingers around his wand. What sort of amulets do you want? Malfoy gave Harry a lopsided smile full of satisfaction. We'll start with the Hogwarts curriculum all the way to Newt level. After that, Mastery level. And a few subjects that interest me, like wards and curse breaking. You should only use one amulet per night. Harry felt compelled to say, lest Malfoy go overboard and end up frying his own brain. Malfoy blinked at Harry in disbelief. You've been using more than one. How many? 4 is too many. That gave me a nosebleed and a pounding headache. Grey eyes widened, and Malfoy stared at Harry as though he'd confessed to being Voldemort in disguise. Are you mental? 4 amulets. Harry ignored him. I did 3 once or twice a week, and the rest of the nights 2 amulets for a while, but I couldn't sleep without them anymore. That's why you were tossing and turning in the Great Hall then, Malfoy mused with a thoughtful frown. I had noticed. Anyway, now I just use 1 amulet and that's working fine. Harry pretended he wasn't a bit ticked off by knowing how bad of an idea it was to use many amulets, while Harry never had a clue about that. Meet me in this classroom twice a week and give me new amulets starting tomorrow. Harry gestured impatient at the door and used a silent until Harry removed the locking and silencing spells. Then Malfoy left the classroom without a backward glance and a vicious spring in his step. Sighing, Harry tucked his wand in its holster and walked back to the library to select the right textbook so he could load a few amulets for Malfoy. Harry didn't mind on a personal level that Malfoy would now also learn magic really quickly. Besides, once Malfoy started using the amulets as well, he could no longer threaten to expose Harry without implicating himself as well. The next day after class, Harry met up with Malfoy and handed him 3 amulets. This is potions, transfiguration, and charms. I'll get you the next one when you've used all of these. Malfoy nodded and accepted the amulets with an eager little smirk. Thank you, my thanks, Potter. I'll see you soon. See you again. Really not my day. My thanks, Potter. See you again soon. And then that was what Harry's life looked like for the next month. Ron and Hermione, who still spent most of their time together bickering about Scabbers and Crookshanks. So Harry took to ignoring them, and even avoiding them more and more. He met up with Malfoy twice a week and gave him more amulets. Malfoy quickly rushed through the Hogwarts curriculum and started giving Harry a small list of books he wanted Harry to use, on all manners of subjects. Malfoy's interests were as eccentric as Harry's own. As it turned out, it was a form of magical mind reading. Harry got every book on occlumency and legitimacy as he could find from the library and copied them onto his amulets. A week later, he knew everything there could be to know about the arts from the moment he spent time practicing occlumency as well as he could. The Gryffindor and Slytherin Quidditch team start their match in the first week of December. The weather is dry but cold, with crystal clear skies, which suited Harry just fine. After about half an hour, Harry spotted the snitch and caught it, while Malfoy tried to knock him off his broom, and Gryffindor won the game. Oliver threw a huge party in the Gryffindor common room, and that evening he kept giving Harry grateful hugs and slaps on the back all throughout the night. The last week before the end of the term, with Christmas just around the corner, the twins cornered Harry just before their second Hogsmeade weekend. We were told you couldn't go to Hogsmeade, Fred said, while holding an old piece of folded parchment in his hands. Also heard Sirius Black wants to do you in, George said with a concerned frown. We overheard our dad talking to you back during the summer, Fred added, and Harry looked at them in confusion. So we have something for you. George elbowed Fred, who gave Harry the old piece of parchment. That was how Harry became the proud owner of the Marauder's map. He used it and his invisibility cloak to sneak into Hogsmeade through a secret tunnel that led to Honeyduke's cellar. He met Ron and Hermione there, but kept his new map to himself and led them to believe he snuck into Hogsmeade, only using his invisibility cloak just like last time. Ron would probably be jealous, and Hermione would almost certainly urge Harry to turn in this fantastic new map. And Harry quite frankly didn't want to deal with their nonsense. They spent some time roaming through the snowy village and then sought refuge in the Three Broomsticks for some warm butterbeer. And there Harry thought a chance encounter learned the whole sordid tale of how Sirius Black betrayed Harry and his parents to Voldemort and killed his own best friend, a chap named Peter Pettigrew. Harry wasn't sure how he felt. Sorry, really just not having a good time. Harry wasn't sure how to feel. Yes, he was furious at Sirius Black for what he'd done to his parents, how he'd betrayed them. And if Harry ran into Sirius Black any time in the near future, he'd kill him, no questions asked. But at the same time, the overwhelming sense of getting vengeance for his family that Harry had expected to feel never surfaced, and Harry mostly felt a kind of numb as he made his way back to Hogwarts through the secret tunnel. Ron and Hermione kept trying to talk to him about what they'd learned about Sirius Black, but Harry brushed them off, telling them he wanted to give himself some time to absorb all the information that he learned that day before he was ready to discuss it. He went to bed early and closed his curtains. He needed a bit of a distraction, so he opened the Marauder's map and studied every inch. The magic that powered the map was absolutely fascinating. Harry cast a diagnostic charm, and he every diagnostic charm he knew, and marvelled at what he learned about the charms and runes that were used to power the map. As Harry tried to figure out how it identified people, he stared at his own dormitory. When he saw two names hovering over the bed beside him, there was Ron's. With two names that was the bed beside him, there was Ron's. Beside his bed, there was Ron's, with two names hovering over it. Harry frowned. What the fuck was going on here? Ron Weasley. Peter Pettigrew. Blinking, Harry looked a little closer. Peter Pettigrew was dead, murdered by Sirius Black. When he learned that Harry had learned just that afternoon, then why was the name hovering over Ron's bed? Was the map broken? Harry cast a few more diagnostic spells. Everything seemed to be working. It made no sense that Peter Pettigrew's name hovered over Ron's bed when Ron was sleeping in there, well and Scabbers, who loved curling up with Ron every night. Harry sat up at once. Scabbers! The lady at the pet shop told them during the summer that the common rats only lived 3 years, and Ron had Scabbers for that amount of time. Well, Scabbers had been Percy's rat for quite a number of years before that. Holy fuck! Scabbers could very well be an animagus. Animagus. Harry had learned about that fascinating bit of magic, how someone could learn how to become an animal. Harry had promised himself that one day in the future he'd try to become an animagus as well, but the process was quite complicated. But there was a spell to force an animagus back to their human form, and if that didn't work, if the map was simply broken, then all Harry had done was rudely awaken Scabbers with a bit of magic, but if Scabbers was really a man hiding as a rat, people needed to know. Harry, for one, didn't want to sleep in the same room as a full-grown man who liked to snuggle up with a young boy's rat or not. Harry pushed the curtains open, wand at the ready. Ron didn't close his curtains, which made the whole thing a whole lot easier. Ron was fast asleep, as were the other boys in the dormitory. There lay on the pillow was Scabbers, eyes closed, breathing deep and even. Harry aimed his wand and non-verbally cast the spell, so as he wouldn't wake anyone yet. Blue light streak of magic screamed and hit Scabbers, who immediately started growing and changing at an alarming rate. Before a long, short, balding man sat on the bed, blinking in surprise at Harry. Ron jolted awake, took one look at the man on his bed, and started screaming. This woke up the other boys, save for Harry, who was screaming. Peter Pettigrew included. Percy Weasley came bursting through the door, an annoyed frown on his face. It quickly slipped when he noticed a full-grown man on his little brother's bed. "We need McGonagall," Harry said, keeping his wand aimed at Pettigrew. "And Dumbledore." "Who is that?" Percy demanded, glaring at Harry as though this was all his fault. "That's Scabbers. We need the adults here. Percy!" Percy gasped at Pettigrew, while his whole body went slack, his wand falling from his hand. Thankfully, a few prefects who had responded to the cacophony of screams going up and down Gryffindor Tower and rushed off to help. Peter looked at his bed and trunk to make sure no amulets were visible. He hadn't put one on yet for the night, so he was good to go. He tucked the map inside his trunk because he didn't want anyone to confiscate it. After a few minutes, Pettigrew calmed down enough to regain his senses and enough of his senses to understand his own predicament. He reached for Ron's wand, which lay on the bedside table, but before he could grab it, Harry stunned him and then tied him up with some magical ropes. McGonagall was the first to arrive, took one look at Pettigrew and inhaled a shocked gasp, face becoming bone white. Harry told her all about the story about how he had been reading at Animagus and realised Scabbers was far too old to be a common rat, so he tried out the animagus reversal charm, and it had worked. McGonagall seemed to barely hear him as she floated a bound Peter Pettigrew out of the dormitory. The next few hours were pure chaos. Ron and Percy were summoned to Dumbledore's office, and later Harry was called there, and he could tell his version of events. He made sure to keep his mind blank and his body calm as he told the story, making sure to be seemingly shocked and horrified by what he'd discovered. Eventually, Harry went back to bed. Ron, who had planned to stay at Hogwarts at the holidays, was packed off to the burrow through the Floo to recover from the enormous shock he'd just had. The next morning, Harry spent an hour telling Hermione over breakfast what had happened in an almost empty Great Hall. "But where did you really learn that spell?" Hermione kept asking, with a shrewd look on her face. She wasn't buying Harry's version of the events one bit, that was obvious. Harry narrowed his eyes and gave her a pointed look. "How are you really attending all of your electives?" That got Hermione to back off, like Harry knew it would. He had figured out by then that Hermione was likely using a time turner, which was a bit much for a third-year Muggle-born student, so she can attend Muggle studies and divination. Oh well, it wasn't Harry's problem. He had plenty of things going on in his own life to keep him busy. There were a few articles on the front page over the next few days announcing Sirius Black's innocence, and Peter Pettigrew was the real secret keeper and betrayed the Potters. Black had spent some time in St. Mungo's to recover, but seemed eager to meet his godson. He sent Harry a few letters in shaky handwriting, and a firebolt for Christmas, much to Harry's surprise and delight. Harry sent him back a few letters talking about Quidditch and his life at Hogwarts, which Sirius seemed to enjoy hearing about. The holidays passed quickly. Hermione spent a lot of time in the library, and Harry spent a lot of time in the Chamber of Secrets practicing all the magic he was still absorbing every night. Malfoy sent him a letter halfway through the holidays informing him he had difficulty sleeping after only using one amulet per night. Malfoy didn't dare use the amulets while staying at home, worried that the house elves might notice and tell his mother. Ron was still a bit withdrawn when he returned to Hogwarts with everyone else. Percy seemed a lot quieter than usual. Not that anyone could blame him. The whole situation was just downright bizarre. During their first meet-up after the holidays, Malfoy had a request for Harry. "How did you manage that Corporal Patronus?" Malfoy demanded, as Harry handed him 3 newly charged amulets. "I've been practicing for weeks and I can only get missed. Show me how to do it." Harry frowned and considered his options. If they took practicing actual magic in an empty classroom, they drew far too much attention to themselves, and that was the last thing Harry wanted to see happen. So far he'd been able to fly under almost everyone's radar, except Malfoy's, unfortunately, and Harry desperately wanted it to stay that way. "I'll help," Malfoy said, crossing his arms and glaring at Malfoy. Harry said, crossing his arms and glaring at Malfoy. "But not here. I know a place. Bring your broom and meet me in the 2nd floor girls' loo tomorrow at 5. "Are you having me on?" Malfoy demanded, looking as though he was certain Harry was setting him up for some sort of unsavoury prank. "Not at all. Meet me if you want to learn the Patronus charm." And with that, Harry left the classroom, not caring one bit if Malfoy showed up or not the following day. Malfoy did show up, looking very put out, standing in the loo while moaning Myrtle floated around him, cooing at him. "This way," Harry said, a very amused grin, a brand new firebolt in his hand. He couldn't wait to use the broom during the next Quidditch match. Harry opened the entrance with a hissed command and jumped on his room, not waiting to see if Malfoy would follow. Though he was cursing Harry and his entire family line several generations back, Malfoy did follow Harry down the dark hole on nothing but a broom. "Wait," Malfoy said, wide-eyed, as he sat up on his broom when Harry halted before the second door decorated with serpents. "Is this the Chamber of Secrets?" "How did you guess?" Harry asked, with a teasing smile, after he opened the metal door and flew inside the chamber and did several loops in the open space while torches sprung to life around them. Malfoy slipped off his broom, opened his mouth opened wide. There were rumours going around that you had found the chamber last year, but no one in Slytherin believed it. Not really. "Here we can practice all the magic we want," Harry explained as he flew down to join Malfoy. "I've been coming here since the start of the year to practice what I've been learning." "Yes, I suppose there's no place more private in Hogwarts than the Chamber of Bloody Secrets." And Malfoy leaned his broom against the wall. "Show me your Patronus, Potter." Harry did, and looked at his silvery fox with a fond smile. The fox looped around them both for a moment before dissolving again. In the end, it took Malfoy 3 weeks of joining Harry in the Chamber of Secrets before he managed to cast Corporal Patronus of his own. A huge silver peacock shot out over Malfoy's wand, its long tail fanning out as it strutted about. Harry couldn't help himself. He burst into laughter, bowing down at the waist while he laughed and he laughed. Malfoy gave him a very annoyed look and immediately became defensive. We have peacocks at home, so I associate them with safety. That's what a Patronus represents, after all, so it would make perfect sense my Patronus would be a peacock. Sure, Harry barely managed to say, still overcome with giggles. It's very you, Draco. It only took a few moments to realise he'd called Malfoy by his first name. He'd be thinking of Malfoy's Draco from time to time, since they were spending a lot of mornings together over the past few months of their relationship. Over the past few months, their relationship had certainly changed. They might not be real friends, not just yet, but they certainly weren't enemies anymore either. Oh, shut up, Harry, Draco said with a pointed look. He didn't correct Harry's use of his first name, so from that moment on, Malfoy was Draco, and that was that. Over the next few months, Harry and Draco kept meeting in the Chamber of Secrets a few times a week. They practiced magic together, brewed interesting potions, and started the progress of becoming animagi together. Draco had procured mandrake leaves for them both, and they rolled them up and placed them under their tongues for a whole month. Thankfully, no one noticed. By March, it was time for Harry to finally time for Draco and Harry to finally. It was by the time Draco and Harry finally sat down to tackle the problem of the summer holidays. It sucked sleeping without the amulet, Draco said as he sat down in the conjured armchair. They added some furniture to the chamber. It was in one corner stood a cozy sitting area, and they'd created a full potions laboratory in another corner. They had added 2 day beds so they could take naps after rigorous dueling practices whenever they came during the afternoon. I barely slept a wink, Draco continued, giving Harry a worried look. I was able to order the house elves to give me some dreamless sleep potion a few times, so I could get some sleep at least, but you can't use that for 2 months either. Harry nodded in understanding. He opened the thermos that the house elves in the kitchen had given him and poured them both cups of tea. It was almost time for them to go up to the castle for breakfast, but they had time for a cuppa. We could make enough amulets for the both of us, Harry mused, sipping his tea. That doesn't solve the problem of my parents finding out if the house elves see me wearing one. Draco sipped his cup and stared off to the distance. I could perhaps ward my room against house elves, claim I wanted some privacy for a good wank or something. That might scandalise my mother enough that she leaves the subject alone. Harry snorted into his cup of tea. That's the spirit. We need to make 150 amulets from scratch. That's a lot of work. Will you show me how to do it? Draco asked with an eager smile. So far, Harry hadn't told Draco how to make the amulets. Harry had been the one to provide them, and he hadn't trusted Draco with the knowledge at first. But now Harry knew Draco enough that at least he trusted Draco wouldn't abuse such knowledge. Yes, fine, Harry said, seeing no reason to keep that information to himself anymore, especially if they needed to make that many amulets from scratch. Harry would need all the help he could get. From that moment on, Harry and Draco snuck into the forbidden forest together to collect the right wood to create brand new amulets. They spent hours and hours inscribing tiny runes in the Chamber of Secrets, both sitting bent over conjured desks until their backs hurt. Sirius Black made it clear he wanted Harry to come live with him, but Dumbledore insisted that Harry needed to return to the Dursleys for a few weeks to recharge the wards that protected him and his family. Harry wasn't happy with that news, but Sirius eventually agreed with it as long as he could go. He could take Harry to the Quidditch World Cup finals that summer. They all agreed that Harry would visit him for the month of August while spending half of the holidays with his Muggle relatives. At the end of April, Harry and Draco were ready to try changing into their animagus forms for the first time. It was a rare spring thunderstorm roared outside when they met up in Myrtle's bathroom in the early evening. Ever since they finished the potion, they were ready to try transforming once the thunderstorm rolled through. "I'll go first," Harry said, as they stood facing each other in the middle of the Chamber of Secrets. He hoped he'd be a bird, because he really wanted to fly. He inhaled a deep breath, spoke the incantation, and pushed his magic inside of himself, where, much to his joy, he encountered feathers. Another push later, Harry's whole body shifted, and suddenly Draco was as large as a giant, or rather, Harry had struck down to the size of a medium bird. "You're a raven!" Draco quickly conjured a mirror so that he could prop up against the wall so Harry could admire himself. He was indeed a raven. He looked at himself with beady black eyes. He flapped his wings until he got the hang of lifting off. Flying was a lot harder than it looked, and Harry hilariously crashed against Draco's head when he tried to touch down for the first time. He changed back so Draco could try transforming. "If I turn into a bloody peacock, I'm seriously going to hurt someone," Draco muttered before closing his eyes and concentrating. Draco did turn into a bird, but thankfully it wasn't a peacock. Draco turned into a beautiful falcon, and before long he and Harry were attempting to fly and land without much success. Eventually they got the hang of it and were able to soar across the chamber. Once they managed that, they met up in the Forbidden Forest so they could fly all across the grounds, and even over the castle itself. Flying without a broom under your own strength was the most amazing feeling Harry had ever experienced, and was beyond elated he got to share it with someone. As the end of the school year approached, Hermione began to slowly lose her mind. She abruptly quit divination, not that Harry could blame her, but she seemed more stressed than Harry had ever seen her before. "Studying Muggles from a magical perspective really worth risking your other grades. I think you'd do much better in your classes without the time travel." Hermione blinked large eyes at him in open-mouthed shock. "I only figured it out recently," Harry whispered with a crooked grin. "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone, but I'm really worried about your grades. Malfoy seems to be outdoing you lately." Of course, Harry knew Malfoy was doing better than Hermione because of the amulets, but Hermione didn't know that. She just needed motivation to stop using the time turner before she drove herself completely insane. "Malfoy's doing better than me?" Hermione asked, voice full of quiet rage. She pursed her lips while a dark frown appeared on her face. "Yeah, he seems to be getting ahead of you in most classes," he said, a sad smile and full of regret. Draco had taken care to gradually increase his grades. Nothing outrageous that would stand out, but enough improvement that anyone would think it was a natural result of a student working hard. Harry himself was still doing good but not great, which suited him just fine. He never cared about grades. He just wanted to learn all the magic he could. Within a week, Hermione announced to Harry and Ron that she'd dropped Muddle studies and would continue with just 3 electives like a sensible person. Sadly for her, she didn't manage to get back on the top of the class ranking for that year. Draco ruled that spot except for defense, where Harry had managed to place first. Harry used the last week of school to prepare himself for the return to the Dursleys. They had exams during the classes, but Harry didn't have to study for those. He could take them in his sleep at this point. Harry snuck his trunk with him under the invisibility cloak and unloaded it in the Chamber of Secrets so he could decide what to keep in his trunk, which Uncle Vernon would most likely lock away for the summer, and what he would keep in his expanding book bag. Do Muggles really not let you keep your school things? Draco asked dubiously, sitting in the armchair and eating raisins as he observed Harry with a keen eye. Not even your books? My Muggle relatives really don't like me, Harry muttered, as he added a strong Muggle repellent charm to his bag. They barely even feed me, so I'll have to visit the house elves before we leave to stock up on some food. Malfoy looked downright alarmed at hearing that, and he muttered about filthy Muggles for a bit. He slowly got up from his chair. I can make you a shrinkable cabinet out of some of the scrap woods that we have lying around. Put some preservation charms on it and some Muggle repellent warts. Harry gave him a grateful smile. That I would really appreciate that. Thanks. It was rather amazing that nowadays Harry would probably call Draco his best friend. So much had changed in such a short time period. He still loved Ron and Hermione and enjoyed spending time with them, but for the whole year he'd been keeping secrets from them. And Draco knew Harry's biggest secret, and shared in it, even. It was just a wonderful experience to have someone there that Harry could discuss all this magic he was learning, to duel against someone as he mastered countless new defensive spells. Draco transfigured a charmed pile of wood nicely until a nicely carved wooden cabinet stood in its place. After Draco added the necessary charms to it, Harry shrunk it and took it to the rooms where he took it with him to his next visit to the kitchen. The house elves were all too eager to fill it with lots of foods that didn't need any preparation. Plenty of pies, both savoury and sweet, lots of fruit and nuts, and plenty of cheese and cured meats. Harry really didn't have to worry about going hungry that summer. I'll send you some things to eat as well, Draco said as they watched the house elves produce more food to add to his cabinet. It's downright absurd that you have to return to the Muggles at all, but it's downright unacceptable that they can't even be bothered to feed you. Harry gave Draco a warm smile, grateful that someone seemed to be as outraged as Harry as himself always felt about returning to the Dursleys. Then Snape decided to be a bitter old man and tell everyone in Slytherin that Lupin was a dangerous werewolf out to eat them. Enough students wrote home complaining to their parents that Lupin was told by the board was told unanimously by the board of governors that he need not return to teaching the next year. Harry and Draco met one last time in the Chamber of Secrets. The morning the day the Hogwarts Express was to take them all home. The elves had provided them with a small feast of hot chocolate and pork pies, which they enjoyed while talking about the up-and-coming Quidditch World Cup. Make sure my cousin takes you, Draco said for the umpteenth time, and he hadn't been surprised that Sirius was Draco's second cousin. Because if he won't, I'll invite you along. You can't miss the World Cup. Now it's being held in Britain. Harry glanced at Draco, his chest full of warm cotton wool. It felt like that whenever he spent time with Draco. It was just nice to have friends who so obviously wanted what was good for you and what made you happy. Harry really wasn't used to that, to have someone actively campaigning for him like that. Draco really wasn't all what Harry thought he'd be. Yes, he was a little arrogant twat, often enough. He was an arrogant little twat often enough, but he was surprisingly passionate and intelligent and funny and surprisingly generous to those he genuinely liked. Even the fact that Harry and Gryffindor team won the Quidditch Cup hadn't ruined their friendship. Draco had whined and moaned about it as one would expect, but he also complimented Harry's flying skills and the technique he used to catch the snitch. Harry was forced to conclude that Draco was someone he genuinely liked those days, and and he would miss his friend during the holiday. "I'll write as often as I can," Harry said. He prepared a few blank pieces of enchantment with compulsion charms on them to give to his aunt and uncle as needed. If they forbade him from sending Hagrid out with letters, he could simply give them the parchment that had the compulsion to let him use his owl. The same for the compulsion that let Harry out of his room and not lock him in it, and several more things like that. Hopefully all that would make Harry's stay at the Dursleys more tolerable for the month that he needed to be there. "I'll write back," Draco said, drinking the last of his hot chocolate, licking his upper lip. "The summer would be so dreadfully boring. There's only so many games of chess I can play with Theo, and only so many walks in the garden with Mother before I can take before I lose my mind." They packed up everything and said a quiet goodbye to their own personal lair. They would be back next year, of course, but now that they had to leave the chamber behind, they flew up to Myrtle's bathroom, and Harry closed the entrance with a quiet hiss before they both stuffed their broomsticks away in their expanded bags. The whole castle was awake and bustling, and they had to hurry to make it to breakfast. "Well, see you next year," Harry said, looking in Draco's grey eyes, feeling a bit choked up now he realised he wouldn't be able to see him for a whole 2 months. "Yeah," Draco sighed, swallowing before a determined frown appeared on his forehead. "I just want to give you something so you don't forget me." Before Harry could react, Draco leaned forward and placed a soft peck on Harry's lips. Oh. So many things suddenly make sense to Harry. But before he could say anything, Draco was already gone, the bathroom door falling shut behind him. Well, that certainly explained the strange, warm feeling Harry always got in his chest whenever he was around Draco these days. Harry couldn't stop smiling, so he joined Ron and Hermione at the breakfast table. "Been flying again?" Ron asked around a mouthful of scrambled eggs. That was the excuse Harry had given his friends throughout the year about why he'd been getting up early and disappearing for a few hours. And Harry did fly when the entrance of the Chamber of Secrets, so it wasn't even lying. "Yeah, I figured I should have my fun with my fireball before I get back to the Muggles." The ride on the Hogwarts Express was uneventful, as was the ride back in Uncle Vernon's car. Harry was used to listening to Uncle Vernon rant about anything and everything around him on the motorway. Thankfully, all the magic Harry used on his belongings worked like a charm. Uncle Vernon locked Harry's trunk away, but didn't even notice his book bag, which held all of the things Harry wanted to keep with him through the summer, including 75 amulets ready to use. Harry went to bed on time, slipping his amulet over his head, and fell asleep at once, learning about advanced weather magic. When he woke up the next morning, Professor Dumbledore was standing next to his bed, looming over him. Dumbledore's eyes fixed around the amulet around Harry's neck. Professor Dumbledore sighed, suddenly looking 10 years older. Harry, my boy, where are all your amulets? So that's the end of chapter 2. I very much hope you enjoyed. The link will be in the description as always. Sorry I've been such a bloody mess this time. I don't know what's been happening with me. Suppose it might be long, but because this is the longest one yet. Or because I'm ridiculously tired right now. I usually film these while tired. Because there's noise when everyone's awake, I suppose. Well, anyway, thank you for listening, and a good night.